There are so many of us committed to improving the lives of the youth in our communities. The In It for Youth podcast is a place for us to come together, from professionals who work with and serve youth to those that champion issues affecting children, to community advocates and stakeholders, and insightful young minds too. The In It for Youth podcast is a tapestry of voices united by a dedication to youth well-being and empowering the young generations of today and tomorrow. I'm your host, Jamie Gale, and I'm so glad you've joined me on this team that is in it for youth. Hello and welcome back to the show. I'm really looking forward to talking with and learning from my guest today, who is the executive director of the local council of a national nonprofit organization. I was introduced to my guest today through a member of her board, Tracy Anderson, who I recently spoke with for an episode of the show. Tracy is on the leadership team of Big Brothers Big Sisters, and if you missed that conversation, go check it out in the feed. Tracy introduced me to my guest today, and she is Christine Benedict of Girls on the Run of South Central Wisconsin. She now serves as executive director there after volunteering for the nonprofit for 12 years in a variety of capacities. Prior to taking on this lead role, Christine held a 20-year career in higher education, ultimately serving as the vice president for enrollment management at Edgewood College here in Madison, Wisconsin. Christine also serves as a Dane County Youth Commissioner and volunteers as a mentor for Big Brothers Big Sisters. So when we say she is in it for youth, she really is. Congratulations on all of your impact on youth well-being, Christine, and welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so glad to be here, Jamie.
So let's start with an overview of Girls on the Run as a whole. It's so much more than a running class, but some people might just only know it on the surface like that. So can you just give us an idea on the program and the organization for starters?
Yes, really. I'm so glad you said it like that. Girls on the Run is so much more than a running program. We are a national movement. It was founded back in 1996 in North Carolina by a woman named Molly Barker, who remains an inspiration to many in the organization and across the country. We are an after-school empowerment program. We're predominantly serving 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade girls, although we have a middle school program as well. And I also like to be clear that we serve youth of all identities. Sometimes our name can be a little bit misleading. You don't have to be a runner. You don't have to identify as a girl, but we are unapologetically girl-centered, and we are working on life skills that are critical to being able to navigate the challenges of adolescence. And we're doing that while moving our bodies, training, working together as a team, and learning from really cool and interesting adult mentors along the way. Kids meet after school on these small teams, typically about 15 kids, and they're led by 3 to 4 adult mentor coaches. And I can talk a little bit about their training later, but the kids meet twice a week after school for 8 weeks. So there are 16 lessons. The lessons are 90 minutes each. And each lesson has a theme related to one of these life skills, maybe something like empathy or positive self-talk or collaboration. And so they get introduced to the theme for the day. They play a couple of games, move their bodies a little while they're exploring that theme. They have some discussion questions that they're working on during those early parts of the lesson. And then they move into a workout where they are actually running or walking or skipping or jumping or however they get around their lap. Each site has a designated lap, which is typically like about 1/10 of a mile or so. And the kids then, over the course of the season, also get to build their stamina, work on goal setting, thinking about how many laps they might work towards at any given practice, depending on how much time they have to move. But also during that workout, they might be asked to discuss a scenario with a running buddy on that lap and come back and share their reflections with a coach. They might be asked to do some breathing exercises or things that they've learned as skills during that lesson that can get reinforced then during that workout, so they can, kind of really take some skill building with them in addition to sort of awareness about this critical concept. So it's a lot of movement and a lot of discussion in each 90-minute lesson.
One of my understandings of it is that it leads to a 5K. Is that consistent across the chapters, or how does the 8 weeks wrap up?
Yeah, great question. So adding a little more context. So over the course of those 8 weeks, I like to share that the first third of the curriculum, as they're really sort of getting to know themselves and getting to know their team, They are really focused on their own individual strengths and what we call star power. So the lessons and skills are related to sort of who they are and what unique gifts and talents they share with the world. Then the middle part of the curriculum is about what happens in like individual one-on-one type relationships. So what kind of friend will you be? What kind of friends are you choosing? Again, thinking about skills like empathy or sort of how to manage some of your emotions as they relate to those interpersonal relationships. In the last part of the curriculum, the kids work together to think about what collective star power looks like. And so as a team, they identify a community in need and think about what kind of actions they can take to help that community with their collective star power. And then it gets even bigger because then each one of these teams of 15 gets to meet together in this celebratory 5K run walk to kind of put it all together and think about all the training, all the time, all the movement they did over the course of, 2 months. They're putting that together and cheering on their teammates and everyone else associated with Girls on the Run at the celebratory 5K. So, like, for example, this spring, we will be in Verona and we will have all 1,200 kids that are participating at 83 different schools this spring. We will have there about 400 coaches and mentors and site liaisons and the people who support our program. And each kiddo is also invited to bring a running buddy with them, somebody who can help cheer them on, keep them safe on the course. And so we will have, nearly 3,000 runners sharing their star power in this 5K, untimed, family-friendly, a kind of movement experience, really.
That's really incredible. And does this happen more than once a year, or is it's spring and fall, or how does that work?
Yeah. So the seasons, we do offer programming 2 times a year in spring and fall. They are independent. So kids can be involved just for the single season. Not every school and site offers it each spring and fall. It can be a little dependent on your community or your school and what their leadership feels like they can manage. And yet we also have a number of sites where we are, every spring and fall sort of without exception.
Cool.
So kids can, in that 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade program, in theory, kids could do the program up to 6 times. And there are 3 different curricular experiences. So same learning outcomes, same sort of cadence to sort of the season and each practice that I talked about, but different games, different scenarios, different ways to experience the lesson. There are 3 different versions.
That's really cool and sounds like quite the project to manage.
Yes.
But that's incredible. I run after school programs, and a lot of the schools that we are in share the site with Girls on the Run. So we have some students that overlap and go to Girls on the Run, and it's just always such a fun, incredible experience for them, and they're always so excited. And so I get to kind of see it on an ongoing basis at the different schools. So it's a cool, I get like a little window into it, and it's always just so impressive. And they're out there, running around their laps at the schools, and it's really impressive.
Yeah, it is fun. I do love to hear that from folks who kind of see it in action. And even though they might not know the ins and outs, they can just kind of see from afar that it looks like the kids are really engaged. It looks like they're really motivated. Each team also has a special lesson where they get to sort of practice the 5K run walk. And so their practice will look a little different that day. They're sort of really focused on the running and movement, not another specific skill or lesson. We provide some special supplies for that experience. So kids and teams will really chalk their sidewalks or school location, or maybe they go to sort of a special spot to do that. And I hear reports from people all over the community that are like, I saw the encouraging sidewalk chalk out on my own walk or my own run. And so I love it when people have a little window into it and can see just how much fun kids are having.
That's great. So, our listenership is a lot of people who work with youth in lots of different ways. And, we have some parents that listen, but also most of our listenership are people who are working actively with or for or to advocate for youth. So we're always interested in a little bit of the nerdy, setup side of things. So when I think about, am I understanding correctly? From the outside, it seems like organizationally, there's probably a national team and then these councils that are more local. But then you also have, you mentioned the volunteer mentors. Are there also staff? Can you give us a breakdown of like what the org chart looks like?
Yes. I love these kinds of questions. So yes, I feel super fortunate to have this pretty solid infrastructure. So yes, so we have this parent entity, Girls in the Run International. They're their own 501c3. And the relationship we have with them, the sort of legal MOU we have with them, is really related to the curriculum. And so they have the research team and the marketing team and the folks that have really built this thoughtful research-backed curriculum that then we are implementing. So the expectation is that we will get coaches and volunteers trained and ready to deliver the curriculum as it's written, because we know that the results are really powerful when it's executed the way that it was intended. And so that's sort of the major sort of connection point with Girls in the Run International. We do pay a small fee to them, sort of like a licensing fee to use that curriculum. I buy the curriculum through them, but we're our own 501c3. So I have some of that autonomy related to like, I get to choose when our season starts and ends. And so, for example, in Wisconsin, we start pretty late in the year because we have a lot of snow still, as opposed to my colleagues in Arizona that are starting the programming in February. That's not for us. And I feel really fortunate too. I get to serve on our National Advisory Council. I've been really involved with just sort of the national organization in addition to our local council here. So then, so I have a small but mighty team of 5 staff that help then manage the council here that now serves 11 counties. When we were started back in 2005 here locally, it was just Dane County. When we started back in 2005, we had one site of 13 kids at Shorewood Hills Elementary School. And it has grown, exponentially, I guess is technically the math phrase for it, to now be at 1,200. It's like from almost like 12 to 1,200 basically over the course of 20 years. So that team, the staff team, has also grown. It started as a completely volunteer-led operation. A part-time staff turned into a full-time staff, turned into 2, and then 3. And again, now we are a team of 5 that are now managing. It's about 600 volunteers a year that are delivering that program. So to that kind of insider question, Girls in the Run International provides training to us and sort of a train the trainer model. We then train all of those volunteers. The volunteers then are provided with all of the curriculum and lesson supplies and materials by us. So we know that each team is set up to have exactly what they need to deliver the programming really consistently. And then my team provides communication to families, communication to those coaches, and sort of all the supports they need. We help provide behavior supports or troubleshooting or problem solving when, there might be a challenge related to the space or location where the site is meeting. So I've got 2 programming staff members. I have an operations coordinator who helps with all those supplies and some of the other volunteers that we bring into the organization. And then I also now have our director of philanthropy. So now I've got somebody to help me do fundraising so that we can provide lots and lots and lots of programming for free, which we do all over our territory. Does that help? I probably took this in a sort of a couple sideways.
No, that was exactly what I was wondering about. And then on the flip side, families, so that's back end, front end, families are registering directly through we're getting into the nitty gritty of it,
yes,
but I
love it.
Families are registering through your organization, but schools are distributing that information to the families.
Yes, exactly. So in an ideal model, which when you've got 83, for example, this season, when you've got 83, not everyone is set up in the like picture perfect ideal model. But in an ideal model, we have what we identify as somebody who's a site liaison. Sometimes that person also serves as one of those coach mentors. Sometimes that person is just willing to be their site's champion and help us get to know that site. So they're the person who helps us figure out what time of day is best for you. Like, what time is bell dismissal? Do you have a space on your campus where we can meet? Is there a picnic table? Is there a gazebo? Is there a little running path? That person also helps us pick which days of the week. I mentioned that we meet twice a week after school, so we want to avoid things like early release days, or if your school calendar has all kinds of, days off of school, how can we, pick an after school time that really works for your site? Typically, again, that site liaison is also going to help us navigate promoting both the coaching and volunteer opportunity and also the student recruitment experience. So when we're new in a community, we love to really make sure that this school feels like they have both like ready access to materials to provide to all of their families. But we also really like to get to know that school community and ensure for them that they can even handpick some kids who they feel like would really benefit from the program, sort of regardless of whether or not their family is the kind of person who's going to get signed up for everything and know when the registration is. Sometimes there are some youth that need a little extra support. And so the site liaison is typically also really great at helping some of those participants as well. Yeah, so some of it is we've got these really active site liaisons to help us with that on-site recruitment. But yes, ultimately, all of the registration goes through our registration software. We have all their waivers and their emergency contact info. And then we also have an app that then our volunteers use to interface with that registration. So they can see who's on their roster, they can take attendance, they can check for pickup, authorized picker-uppers, as I call them. That's how some of that information transfer works.
Awesome. I love it. Thank you for breaking that down. I'm always so curious to hear about how organizations are doing that. So this is more of a programming question, but why do you think that this particular program is so incredibly popular and engaging for kids? Many of these kids in PE class probably groan when it's running day.
Yes.
And so I'm curious, why do you think there is so much robust enthusiasm for these young kids to run after school multiple times a week when many kids normally would moan and groan about needing to do something like that after school? So yeah, I'm just curious, what's the magic?
Yeah, I think there are a couple parts that I think are particularly magical. One, I think the fact that we cover 3 grades is a little bit unique in the movement space. So it is so much fun to have some 5th graders who've maybe done the program before, who now can serve in a little bit of a leadership capacity. These 3rd graders, kind of eyes wide, can kind of, look up to the 4th and 5th graders who've maybe done that experience. So you get to meet some different folks, perhaps who you haven't connected with before. It feels like, in my experience over the years, if we were to break it down, I would say about 40% of the kids love the discussion and the friendship, like the games, the chatter, the getting to be in this really girl-centered space where, again, thoughtful discussions are encouraged. They're not as much there for the running. And there is some grumbling, let's be honest. Yeah. Not everybody is super enthusiastic about it. And on the flip side, we also have some kids that are there for the running. They are cannot wait to get those laps started. Are you really asking another question about my emotions and how I feel about this? And they are I don't know. I don't have anything to share. And then you've got about 20% that I say that are this is their whole jam. They're this is everything I ever wanted. It is running. It is just, that's me, I am there for the social parts of running and moving with my friends and that kind of thing. So it's really a breakdown, but I would say it's also the fact that we can accommodate all of that. I think that's what the magic is that it is not competitive, which I think is super unique in the movement space, especially as you get into 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. So much becomes performance-based, whether that's in athletics or in music or in even the, arts kind of all kinds. This is just movement for movement's sake. You're active. You've got a plan for the afternoon. Sometimes you're not even really thinking about the running piece. We do a lot of tag and relay games where you didn't even really realize you were doing all that running. I think there's some magic in that, but that we can be pretty adaptable to the things and parts that kids love. And then they can just sort of, grumble through the parts that they're not as excited about.
That's great. So I'm curious, and you touched a little bit on this when we first started talking, but, the question of why girls? And I know that might sound a little silly because, of course, right, we should give opportunities for girls to be active. And I myself run organizations. Like I run a group for moms that own businesses that, for anybody who identifies as a mom. And so I get it. And can you kind of put some words to why has the organization stayed true to just
girl-centered programming?
Yeah, girl-centered programming, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for asking that. We do want to be inclusive and feel like we are open to people who would benefit from girl-centered programming. And I still believe that it's critical. The research still shows that our confidence levels as girls and women, they peaked at age 9, and our activity levels peaked at age 10. This is some staggering research. We know too that the dynamics are changed in a group when even one boy identifying person participates in the programming. We all start to act a little bit differently, change some of the ways we communicate. And so we still really believe in the power of these girl-centered spaces, talking about things that might be unique to our lived experiences. And we know too that when girls are empowered, they become empowered women. And we still know too that the statistics are not in our favor. We are still underpaid relative to our male counterparts. We are still in fewer leadership positions in national corporations and local government. We need to continue to invest in our girls, because also on the flip side, when you look at what happens when we have strong women in those leadership roles, businesses are more successful. That when families are led by strong and empowered women, the economies improve. I mean, there are so many reasons to be investing in our girls and our women. I'll also say about 95% of our coaches and mentors are women. You do not have to be a woman to serve as a coach. We have plenty of dads, or we've had some grandpas serve in that coach role. But we also get a lot of feedback that the women that are serving in those coach roles also feel empowered by the curriculum. And that was something that kept bringing me back for 12 years as a volunteer. Every time I was running from work, feeling like I did not have the time or space to give, I would get to the practice and go through this lesson. I always use positive self-talk as an example. And I'd be like, oh, I think this lesson was for me today, not for these 8-year-olds. I needed to be reminded of how important it is when I think about the things I say to myself. So anyway, think it's a great question, and there's still a really strong answer for why we need to be investing in our girls and women.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. And one of my favorite books is The Art of Gathering by Priya Parker.
Yes, love it.
And she talks a lot about how it's just as important who you are not inviting as who you are inviting, and to sometimes exclude intentionally to create the space that helps you achieve the goal you want. And I mean, this is a question that obviously it's different, but like I mentioned, that group for moms that own businesses, I get this question all the time. Can I join? I'm not a mom yet, or I'm a dad, but I could use this type of community, that kind of thing. And it has been something, we just celebrated our 10th anniversary of this group, and it's a question that makes my stomach hurt a little bit, because I don't want to be excluding people. I think that there is value in this content for anybody, similar to what you're describing. There's a topic of the day and we talk about our experience in it and all of that. However, I do think one of the reasons why this group has continued for so long is because everyone there can talk about a similar or shared experience. And so in that sense, I do totally understand about the value of creating spaces that are for people that have a similar life experience. And so I didn't mean to challenge it, but I know that is something that people ask and kids ask. So I was just curious, and I really appreciate your candid answer on that.
It's a great question. And like I said, I try to stick with the idea that we are unapologetically girl-centered. That programming was designed and made for girls and girl-identifying youth. And there may be some exceptions to that. There may be some kids that really would benefit that don't identify as a girl. And we are happy to sort of work with that. But that's going to be the exception. I mean, really, 98% of our participants identify as girls. So, yeah.
Great. And I do think I've seen a little bit pop up with there. People are trying to start other groups, there's a Let Me Run group for boys, I think. And so that's great. I appreciate your answer on that. So I'd love to talk for a few minutes about the balance of orchestrating multiple locations of the program. You mentioned that even in your council, there are over 80 sites.
11 counties. Yeah, in 83 sites.
Yeah, 11 counties, 80 sites, and you're running multiple sessions. And so I'm really curious. I mean, this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart as we run more sessions of camp and more sessions of after school. And I have instructors going into many different sites to teach kids yoga and just on and on and on. When you have a streamlined goal and a consistent curriculum plan, but scaling takes your hands out of implementing it at each site. And so you, one, don't have control or the say in exactly how it's delivered, and different settings and different circumstances may benefit from variability. And so I'm just thinking about, you have all these different sets of staff and volunteer mentors and the site liaisons and schools and physical spaces. So how do you think about this balance of keeping your programming high and the content consistent, but also allowing for adaptation? Like, do you have any sort of mental rubrics that you run through as you make decisions about this?
It's such a good question. And I think I feel pretty confident in our training. And because our curriculum is so prescriptive, like the curriculum books, I mean, it is literally written like, say this. I mean, do these, every minute is sort of scripted in that 90-minute. Now, is everyone following that to the letter? Absolutely not. Like that, it's impossible. Right. And I feel pretty confident that there's not so much going rogue because there's sort of so much clarity about what to come back to. So I do even tell people, I trust these folks who have been trained and background checked by us to use their good sense and judgment. So for example, if it looks like weather's coming and you want to get your workout in before the game, okay, flip-flop those on the day. I trust you to do that. Mm-hmm. Or maybe 2 lessons need to be changed in order because, again, the practice 5K, which you want to do outside from weather dependent, would be better. Those are things I trust people to manage what I would consider to be some minor details, while then trusting that the overarching experience and the takeaways are going to feel pretty consistent. Interestingly, there are some things, especially as we get into more rural counties and we think about whether it's pricing or we think about team size or we think about how to make sure that it feels like kids and families get access or know about. That has been a little bit surprising, not shocking. And yet, as we continue to navigate it, I still sometimes find myself feeling like, am I being fair? Am I making the right decisions? But the average family income in Lafayette County is very different than it is in Dane County. We haven't talked about it, but Girls on the Run is predominantly a fee-based program. We offer families the opportunity to use a sliding scale and opt into a fee that works for them. But currently, the top end fee is $175. And online, families can register at a price point that goes down to $25. They can also call and get a code, and it can be completely free. Or maybe somebody from their school community has offered them a free code. And again, we are happy to provide free programming to anybody who asks for it. But $175 is going to look very different in Dane County and the Madison area than it is in Darlington, Wisconsin. And so that's something that honestly our programming team is wrestling with right now. We just added these 3 new counties, Lafayette, Grant, and Richland, and we've had some pilot sites in Fenimore and Richland, and we are so proud to be bringing something like a big national brand, this really high quality program to these small communities. It does feel really scalable in that way. So we're super proud to be able to do that. And it does take some getting used to figure out like what works for them. That $175 price point it doesn't matter how much you say financial assistance, because I think there are families in those communities that wouldn't see themselves as typically like qualifying for quote unquote financial assistance, but they're not going to pay $175 for something. So kind of getting into that nitty gritty, it's like, oh, that's a tough one to figure out how to make sure we're sustainable, we're equitable, and yet meeting communities based on their needs. So, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I think it is such a juggling act. It's sort of the dream, right? To be able to just scale in that way, to have things so systematized. But then, yeah, you sometimes need to be like, okay, wait, that system needs tweaking or changing. So yeah. I feel you on that.
Or, I mean, I think about an example. We expanded fairly rapidly in Beloit. We were in 1 school in Beloit, then we were in 3, then we were in 6, now we're in 7. I mean, it's like, which has been great. And we recognized that we were actually going to have to provide some bus transportation to our 5K experience because that's on a Saturday morning. That's not right after school at your site where you can just stay and then figure out how to get home afterwards. This is now driving over an hour to get to this culminating experience that we want everybody to be able to enjoy. So again, there've been some adaptations that we've made along the way, trying to figure out how to ensure everybody's having that, like you mentioned, that consistent experience.
Well, kudos to you for adapting along the way, because it's always a balance, right? You don't want to be recreating the wheel for every site, every activity, every session, everything, but you do need to stay nimble. So kudos to you on that. So I'd love to learn a little bit more about your career in general. You have worked with youth and served youth in so many different ways. Can you kind of take us a little bit through your career path? Maybe let's stop first at your work in higher ed. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yes. So I'll start a little bit with college because that kind of works into how I got into higher ed. I happened to be a runner. I started running in the 6th grade. I was not particularly athletic and discovered running through like the presidential fitness test and fell in love with it back at a time when there weren't a ton of sports for every girl. It was like softball and soccer. Neither of those met my strengths. And so I fell in love with running, ultimately did that through high school, decided I wanted to continue to do that in college. And so ran Division III cross country and track, and fell in love just with college and the college experience, and had some incredible mentors. I was at Lawrence University up in Appleton, Wisconsin, who helped me recognize that actually working in higher ed, I didn't have to leave college if I stayed working in higher education. So I ended up pursuing a degree in higher education administration, which then through a series of kind of personal choices, so my now husband and I could live in the same state, ultimately brought me back to Madison. And so I was able to work in another small college environment, which I loved. I had previously been at Indiana University and then now moved to Madison and started working at Edgewood College. And again, I really enjoy that higher education environment. I just feel like helping now older youth, but still really folks who are in a, absolutely in a,
my oldest is 18 and about to start college. And so I understand they're very much kids.
Yes. They're in this really cool transition in their life, trying to figure out what adulthood looks like for them. I loved being a part of helping kids and families make this like really big decision that feels like kind of their first decision as an adult. Like this one is sort of uniquely theirs. And so I loved getting to talk to kids and families about how they make decisions and how they might find a place that was going to help them be their best selves and figure that out. I mean, college isn't for everyone, that's for sure, but I loved the folks that were finding their way, especially into Edgewood, but really into any environment. I loved helping people even find college experiences that were not the places where I was working over the years. And then really it was through a friend of a friend who knew I was a runner and was still sort of involved in a few running clubs, who was an early founder of Girls on the Run. She helped bring the program to life in 2005. In 2007, she needed to rotate off of the board of directors, and the board at that time was, they were relatively new. And so basically you just found your own replacement. Like it was just anyone who would say yes. And so I was like, yeah, okay, I'll join the board of directors. I didn't even really know what I was getting myself into. And I mean, basically immediately as I got exposed to the curriculum, I was like, well, I have to coach this. I have to see this firsthand. Started coaching then in 2008. And it was my side passion, so as my work responsibilities became more and more challenging and interesting professionally, I needed even more, I feel like, this sort of valuable volunteer time to kind of step away from my work life. And so for 12 years or so, then I ended up coaching and just sharing what we call, that star power with my community, both in Madison, and then I moved to Stoughton and coached there for a number of years. And then honestly, it was somewhat serendipitous. I had been in higher ed for almost 20 years. I was serving in this leadership capacity and trying to figure out kind of what was next. I'd always been a pretty ambitious leader. And so once I had been about 5 years in this vice president role and thinking like, okay, what's next? The opportunity to lead Girls on the Run sort of just appeared. And I was just too curious about what that might be like. And honestly, I reflected a lot on what I was telling our kids, our youth, like you can do what you can. Yeah. You can be who you want to be. You can try new things. You can push yourself. And I thought, well, I mean, maybe this is me. It was never, I had definitely some transferable leadership skills that I won't deny, but I had not really been that exposed to the nonprofit sector in that way, but I felt comfortable knowing as much as I did about the history of this organization and our financials and the board work and those things. So I jumped in with both feet 6 years ago.
Well, that's really full circle. I mean, it's so cool how many people that are in the youth serving industry. I mean, and this is probably true of most industries, but how so many of us have, quote, returned to the things that we really loved as youth ourselves.
Yes.
And so, I mean, that's certainly true for me. Camp was a huge part of my life growing up. And now, I co-direct a summer day camp. So it's just very cool to always hear this story because so many of us, as we grew up, we also allowed our youth to continue into our adult life. So
yes, exactly. Yeah. I can't
great.
believe in some ways that I get to help get kids exposed to running. Now, again, like to be clear, we're not a running development program. And yet there are a bunch of kids that do fine. I just met a parent this morning whose kiddo is graduating from high school. She is the captain of her track team. And the mom was showing me her senior pictures where she had included her Girls on the Run t-shirt from 10 years ago in her array of important track and running shirts in her senior photos. So that was just today. I mean, this woman did not know she was going to meet me. This was just a networking event. So it's pretty cool to get to feel like I had maybe a small part in helping somebody find they love running.
That's wonderful. I love that. And then you also serve as a Dane County Youth Commissioner. What does that mean?
Yes. Yeah. So thanks for asking about that. So one of the things that I discovered was important to me in taking on the Girls on the Run role is that I still like to have something outside of my workday to remind me that the world exists. Other things are happening outside of what I'm doing day to day. And so when I was in the higher ed sector, Girls on the Run was my side sort of volunteer gig. Kind of in between there, I also then started to get involved with Big Brothers Big Sisters. But now my little is not so little anymore. She is nearly a sophomore in college. And so, so even though I'm going to see her tonight for ice cream, it's not the same as it was, 8 years ago. So I decided to try to figure out if there was some other way I could give back to the community, learn something new, learn about a different part of the way the world works, but yet wanted to continue to stay in this youth serving lane, just feeling like, okay, I have some unique perspectives. I also, work in Madison, but live in Stoughton. And so sort of feel like Dane County feels like I have some unique perspectives on how to serve the county. And so, so I pursued a community member role on the Dane County Youth Commission. And it's been really enlightening, honestly, to just get a little bit more familiar with how local government works. The Youth Commission is really a group of folks that are led in part by a staff member from Dane County Health and Human Services. We then have members of the Dane County Board of Supervisors who are elected officials who serve as also sort of leaders and liaisons to our Youth Commission. The Youth Commission also has youth members. So there are high school students who represent their different high school communities. And then there are other essentially youth serving folks. There are some appointees from the school district, a couple of different school districts actually in the county. And then I'm like a general community member. And we are focused on a couple of different projects, are sort of the primary responsibilities of the Youth Commission. We lead the survey that is the Dane County Youth Assessment. So throughout the county, every 3 years, our middle schoolers and high schoolers are surveyed so we can get an idea of what is on the minds of our youth. And the 2024 results just came out last fall. This year, we are really focused on helping share more information, distribute. So for your listeners, if you haven't yet checked out the Dane County Youth Assessment results, if you just searched for Dane County Youth Assessment, you would be able to find that very comprehensive report about what is happening related to things like sleep, connections with friends, alcohol and substance use, relationships. There's so much information that our schools and community leaders use to help drive policy change locally as a result of that youth assessment. And then we also fund some grant initiatives for a program called By Youth for Youth. So if, again, there are listeners who might be interested in youth-led grants, so maybe you work with, again, probably middle school or high school leaders who might want some funding to support an initiative that they are really interested in bringing to their school community, their church community, just their community in general, they can apply for grant funding through the By Youth for Youth grant program. And as the name might suggest, all of the folks who are reviewing those applications are youth, making those selections, and then all the folks who are leading the projects are all youth as well. So those are two of the primary initiatives. And then kind of meeting to meeting, we're sort of trying to either unpack more results from the assessment and see, is there more policy work we can advance to help support youth in our community. For example, we have had a guest recently from Madison West High School. Their civics club is interested in trying to do some awareness campaigning, potentially moving towards some actual policy changes that are available in other states. But there are states where high school students are able to vote in school board elections.
I saw this recently, something about it, and I was like, wow, look at these kids
go. Look at these kids go, exactly. And it makes great sense, I feel like. These are people who are absolutely affected by school board decisions. Learning about civics and voting and, voter empowerment, I feel like it would be such a great way to really see how that works. And so, these students now, it will be it's a long road in Wisconsin. It would be sort of a constitutional amendment change. It's not just something we could do locally or just for an individual school board. So, but this is all stuff I'm learning. That's what I mean. It's like fascinating, super enlightening. I did not ever see myself getting involved in this way. And I'm not sure where it would go from here, but I've been pretty excited. This will be almost 2 years on the Youth Commission now, and I'll get to do that for a while yet. So
you are amazing. I can't believe how much you do. It's really incredible. And we will link the assessment in the show notes because I think that lots of our listeners would be super curious about that. We have many listeners in Dane County. And so I will definitely link that there. But thank you for filling me in. I'm kind of like, I might need a part 2 of that discussion. That's super interesting. I love to hear about it. So that is great. So what is, I want to say next for you, but you're already doing so much, but do you have any sort of personal or professional goals as you kind of look into the next stage, the next batch of moments in your life? Or are you like right now your hands are full and that's that?
Oh, what a fun question. The big thing that's on the horizon for me that I'm excited about that is professional related is that Girls on the Run, I think I might have thrown it in, is celebrating 20 years in this community. And we are hosting a 20th anniversary celebration on October 4th. Girls on the Run has not hosted a big fundraising event for years. It's been 5 years for a variety of reasons. And so we are excited to have this anniversary celebration. There will be a fundraising component, but it's also about bringing back some of the folks who've been involved for 20 years or any of those years in between. So that will be at the Memorial Union's Great Hall on October 4th. We're expecting to have, over 300 people really looking back on those 20 years of impact, which powerfully will have served over 25,000 kids by that point. It's just pretty crazy. We'll have given away over $1 million worth of free programming. So there will be a lot to celebrate at that event in October. Right now, that's the big thing that and then right away after that, on November 8th, we'll have our next Girls on the Run 5K. So, that will be a quick turnaround in the fall. Okay. And really, that's about as far as I can get.
This is very reasonable.
Yeah. And then we'll see. But something that's fun about and similar, working in higher ed and working in a cyclical program like Girls on the Run is that it is pretty fun that you do get to kind of really set your sights on sort of the next big season. And then you get a break, and then you can sort of reset and look forward to the next season and how you might improve it or change things or get different people involved. So just set ourselves up for the next cycle.
I love it. I love it. All right. There's a question that I ask all my guests at the end of the episode, and that is, if you could wave a magic wand on behalf of kids in 2025, what would you wish for them and what messages would you tell them?
Yeah, it's a tough one these days. I will say, I know there's probably other folks maybe have shared this as well, and certainly some of the research. I do wish we could get kids outside and communicating and playing with their friends, sort of away from as much tech as possible. I know there are so many great and helpful things that have come as a result of having easy access to devices. And don't get me wrong, I watched my fair share of TV as a youth, but learning a lot about what that kind of access to tech looks like day in, day out. And so if I could wave a magic wand, it would be to sort of just reduce the allure for kids. I think, it's some of it is that they just are doing what they see adults doing and they just want to be grown up. They see that this is what we're interested in. There must be something super compelling about it. They just want to do what we're doing. And so I wish for them that it just didn't look that cool, like enjoy being the kid where you can, just play games, be outside, stare into space, whatever, read a book, get lost in other activities. I wish we didn't make it look so cool.
Totally. Well, thank you so much for joining me today and for being in it for youth, Christine. Please tell listeners where they can reach out to you, where they can find out more about Girls on the Run, and we will link all of that in the show notes.
Yeah, awesome. Most of the information you should be able to find is at our website, Girls on the Run SCWI for South Central Wisconsin, so scwi.org. So you can find out more information about coaching or bringing a site to your school or community. You can find ways to get in touch with us by email. You can also find me on LinkedIn at Christine Benedict. Always interested in connecting with folks who, want to be engaged in the youth and youth empowerment and after school programming sector. So
awesome. Well, thank you again for joining me, and to all the listeners, thank you so much for listening. We'll be back next time with another inspiring interview. And I just want to mention that Lit Path Studios, the podcast network, is now supporting people in starting their own podcast. So if you are interested in starting a podcast for yourself or for your organization or for your business, please reach out to us at litpathstudios.com and we will talk through what that could look like, taking your podcast from idea to launch. So reach out to us at www.litpathstudios.com. In It for Youth is a Lit Path Studios production. Music is by Inspiring Audio and Pond 5. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And to learn more about this show and all other shows on the network, visit www.litpathstudios.com.